everybody. Nikki Burnett here, Taste Life Nutrition radio and podcast streaming live on KUHSdenver.com. And today's just me. So we're going to have some fun with nerding out a little bit on lab panels that can be really important to understand because we see them so often. When we go to the doctor runs our Comprehensive Metabolic Panel. We look at it, we're like, I don't really know what it means, but the doctor would tell me if I'm supposed to know something or if there's a red flag, and then, you just sort of put it away and do it again next year, hopefully. So we want to dig into that a little bit and, really talk about what some of those ranges mean and what they can mean for you and for your health and for true dysfunction and then for optimal health. So, but before that, we always start the show with gratitude. So, thinking about this while I was driving in this morning, and it's interesting. I think that a couple of things that I'm really grateful for today. For one, I'm grateful to be really close to this election cycle and getting it sort of done and out of the way and moving forward with all of that. With that being said, also I'm grateful for my faith because there's so much, we're sitting in this place of so much confusion and frustration and people combative and combating each other and not knowing what's next and what to do. And it's really gotten quite ugly, and really I'm afraid it's just going to get uglier after the election. We'll see. But we're in a situation where our health is worse than it has been. We don't understand why is our health so bad. Well, we have so much that we're fighting against, and that is probably a topic for another show. Actually, I know it is. It's something that I have going on in my brain right now. But we have to. I think it's so important that we really take a look at ourselves and what it means, what our own health means, and what we can do. I mean, this is why I do this show, right? Is so I can hopefully bring me or any of my guests, bring to you information that helps you to open up to what you can do that's best for you and for your family as you move through the rest of your life and move through, what you might deal with, with your family. And so when we have information, we have education, that's the stuff that can help us to make good decisions. Or just make decisions, right? We don't always make the best decisions, but at least we have the knowledge and the information to make decisions. And that's what life is about, is making, it's having the information so you can make decisions that are best for you. And so, my faith helps to guide me through that as well. I'm grateful for that. And I think that, I think a lot about just the need for so many of us to sit back and pray. And if you're not a prayer, then, think about praying, because that's something that we all need. And then, with that is just being in gratitude. And really, with so much that's going on, I'm looking outside right now, and the sky is this beautiful color of blue, and the trees are orange and red and green and yellow, and it's just really beautiful. And today's Halloween. You've got all the fun that the kids are doing. So, so many great things to be grateful for, and there are a lot of people right now who are bringing to the forefront the stuff that I'm talking about, but they have a lot bigger voice than I do. So talking about, the dis-ease forming, ingredients in our food, the fast food, the boxed foods, the colorings, the preservatives, these things that are in our food that literally, and you've probably heard this, is really big now, thank God, but the things that are in our food that you'll have say the Kellogg factory that will make a Raisin Bran for Europe that's completely different than the Raisin Bran for us here in the United States, right? So Europe is much more clean, the ingredient list is much more small, where here they just fill it with sugar and preservatives and colorings and trash and all these things that what does it do? It makes us sick and it dumbs us down. So this is the stuff that we need to step up and be aware of and truly, vote with our pocketbooks. I mean, we got to get out the vote next week. Everybody get out and vote. You just got to do it. This is such an important race. But to vote with your pocketbook and stop buying the trash, because this is the stuff that is killing us early. And it's not right, and it's not fair, and it's really frustrating. And people are standing up, and they're trying to be shut down. But people are standing up and saying this is not okay, and we need to be aware, and we need to move forward away from this toxic BS that we're being fed, literally and figuratively. So anyway, I know maybe that doesn't sound like gratitude, but maybe I'm also grateful for those people who have the voices, who are coming forward and standing up and letting people know, throughout, whether it's the government agencies or doing the podcast or whatever it is, to beat on this drum that we don't deserve this type of treatment, but we have to, it's about us. You hear me say this all the time. I make my own decisions. I make my decision as to whether I buy Raisin Bran or I make my own, nut-based granola, right? These are the things where we make decisions every single day. It's up to me. It's not up to the government. They can feed us BS and we can eat it, or we can say, no, I'm putting my foot down and I'm making my own real good, healthy food for myself, for my family, for the generations that are ahead of us. So take that and really start to pay attention. There are a couple of people who are fairly new to the scene, or new as far as I'm concerned, that would be good to pay attention to, I think. So Casey and Callie Means, if you've not looked them up, do it. I think that they have a lot of really important things to say. One is a doctor, one has been in government and lobbying, and that kind of thing. And so they both have a really interesting view of health and the sort of the overarching, big health, big pharma, big, food kind of thing. That is, it's really interesting. And then there's Brigham Bueller, who is new to me, that I just found out about, who I am really digging as well. So would be worth checking them out. And then of course, I'm doing my part, trying to do my part to beat the drum here too. So anyway, let's jump in. So we're talking about a comprehensive metabolic panel, and I wanted to talk about this because this is something that everybody gets done typically every year, or pretty often. It's kind of that basic panel that's run to understand a lot of the organ systems and how the organ systems are functioning. The thing with it though, and what I have experienced in my 10 years of practice, is it can be a very broad and really robust panel that gives us a lot of information. But what I see more times than not is it's pretty minimal. And when I'm running, if I'm ordering a comprehensive metabolic panel for someone, it's a really big test. I mean, I'm looking at all thyroid markers, right? So if you have recently had, or if your panels and you've had your thyroid markers run, probably, unless you've been to a functional medicine practitioner or functional nutritionist, either way, you probably have seen 1 to 3, maybe 4 markers that are run, when there are 9 to 10 markers that we can run to help us understand thyroid function. Thyroid it's not just this gland that sits right here. The thyroid, we have thyroid hormone receptor sites on every cell of the body. Our thyroid is in part, it functions in part because of the pituitary gland, and then the thyroid affects liver health and gut health, which those also affect then the thyroid. So there, it's part of this massive system. Everything's connected. And if we're not looking at all these markers, then we don't really have full understanding of is it a thyroid issue? Is it an immune issue? Is it a pituitary issue? Is it a gut issue, right? We need to really fully understand what all of this means. And so I want to see as much of this as I can. And so, I'm also including like the CBC when I say comprehensive metabolic panel. These things are typically run together. And so we want to look at these when we're looking at general lab ranges, which is what we see, which is interesting too. Fascinating, not in a good way, is that lab ranges can vary from lab to lab. Why? I don't know. That's confusing enough. It also, there are, opinions based in, data, sure, but, on, what should a range be, and it's not taking into consideration the person. This is the stuff that we have to take into consideration. General lab ranges don't do that, and the fact that labs can have different ranges, it just makes it really confusing. So, when we're looking at lab ranges from a functional perspective, we're more looking at them from an optimal perspective. So a general lab range, if you see a red flag come up, then it's typically, it's more pathogenic. We want to really understand, dig in, why is this elevated or too low, and, understand, just that piece of it. It's kind of how I see it. Whereas if we're looking at functional lab ranges, they tend to be, for lack of a better word, more narrow, right? So more red flags would come up. But they're not pathogenic red flags. They're more, hey, this is something that we need to see. We need to start taking all of the pieces of the puzzle, wrapping this in with it, so we can have a bigger, broader, better understanding of true health. And so when red flags come up out of functional range, we're taking lifestyle, food, sleep, history of trauma, goals, needs, symptoms, certainly, taking all of those things into consideration so we can put it all together. And then for me as a practitioner, I can say, okay, these are the things that we can do starting at this point, which is going to be, sort of that root cause point, the best of my ability. And then also we're bringing in other labs if we're running other labs as well. But bringing those in, and we start at that root cause, or that foundation of health, and address those things. So we're not just starting at the top and saying, okay, we just need to supplement, vitamin D. We might need to say, well, instead of just supplementing vitamin D, we need to actually understand our genetics. What are our genetics when it comes to vitamin D? We need to be out in the sun. We need to take our, have as much skin exposed in the sun as possible. We need to stop wearing sunscreen all the time. Obviously the sun is to be respected, so we don't want to get burnt, but we need to be in the sun. So there are a lot of things that go into this, and let's just start with vitamin D. I think that's an important one, because what we find that general lab ranges show is if you're at 30, you're fine. That is not okay. It's not okay. And, I'm seeing people in the teens, which is just, it's horrible. It's really, really horrible. Vitamin D is no longer considered a vitamin. It's a hormone. So it functions as a hormone. Hormones are communicators. And so if we are low in vitamin D, what is it that's going awry in the body because there's communication that's not happening? So vitamin D plays a role in kind of in everything. I mean, what does it not play a role in? I don't know. It's one of those things, simple enough that if you have thyroid issues or thyroid dysfunction, it could be that raising your D could make a difference for you, right? It probably would make a difference for you. And the functional range for D it varies depending on the practitioner and some of the science, but anywhere between 60 and 100. So in my mind, I like to tell people I want to see you right around 70. If you have an autoimmune condition, I want to see you at 100. And so that's an important one, because people are coming to me and they're saying, okay, well, my D levels are fine. I'm told that they're fine. So my question is, great, what's the number, so I can actually have an understanding. And it's one of those things too that we have a little bit of fear around vitamin D, because it's fat soluble. So we have our fat soluble nutrients, A, D, E, K, and that means that they have the potential of building up in the tissue, where you have your other nutrients that don't build up in the tissue because they're just excreted. So there's some fear around vitamin D at higher levels, but I mean, you have to take a lot of vitamin D for a long time for it to actually create a lot of problem. And so, but we do want to test. I want to know what those numbers are before I start to do any kind of dosing of vitamin D. Now, might do some low dosing just to be, cautious. But when I see somebody sitting at, 30, I'm going to megadose, and then I'm going to taper it back. And another important point is vitamin D long-term should not be taken without vitamin K. So keep that in mind. If you're taking D alone, you need to add in vitamin K. Okay, so you want to get your levels to where they need to be, add in your vitamin K, K2, and then that's good. So another thing that is, I was sort of meant to hit on this, but got a little sidetracked, but there are a number of things that can happen when you have optimized that maybe you didn't know. So an interesting thing that happened with my husband was he started taking vitamin D, optimized his levels. The pain that was in his hands went away. And he asked me if that was normal. I'm like, I think that anything is normal, or it can happen when, if you're deficient in something, things don't work properly. So sure, yeah, of course. I think that that's the case. And I've heard that now a number of times where hands stopped hurting. So getting your levels optimized is really important. So let's do this. Let's talk about, we hit on D. Let's talk about glucose. Glucose is an interesting one because we're told that our ranges are up to 99. Anything over 99, glucose is elevated. And, it can be really crazy elevated. So the thing you got to think about with glucose is it literally, when it's too high, it's literally making your blood sticky, which means it's making all of your organs sticky. And so when things are sticky, they don't work well. And so, having elevated glucose can create insulin resistance. It can create estrogen dominance, cortisol production, thyroid suppression, sex hormones. So it can lower testosterone. It can create leptin resistance. It can interfere with growth hormone. It can cause inflammation, right? So we don't want, when we're looking at functional ranges, the lab range is up to 99. We really want it, like it 75 or 80 is really what is going to make the most sense for most people. There was, I've been told on a number of occasions that when we are older, and I think it was like over 60, that it's okay and normal for glucose levels to be elevated. I've not seen anything that really shows that that's okay. It doesn't change the biochemistry of glucose making everything sticky. So I think that having higher glucose as we age is a problem. We may normalize it because we're getting older, but I don't think that it's a normal it's a normal place for our glucose to be, because I still think that it's problematic. So keep that in mind, and know that if it's sitting at 99, you still want to work on it some. Think about your lifestyle. Things to remember, which this is how we start, putting pieces of the puzzle together. Things to remember about elevated glucose is it's not necessarily always sugar intake. It can be stress. Stress can create, so if you have a lot of stress going on, your glucose can be elevated. What happens? Well, it creates cortisol, which chronically elevated cortisol is inflammatory. Chronically elevated glucose is inflammatory. It all works together. So we want to look at these things, and another thing we can look at here is our sodium and our potassium ranges. So our ratios, sodium and potassium, if those ratios are off, and if both of them are elevated, we're looking at adrenal dysfunction, right? Or we're looking at excessive stress, right? So again, you start putting all of these things together so you can start to understand your body and why. If you have a perfect, what a really good diet and you don't eat a lot of sugar and a lot of processed foods and unhealthy fats and that kind of thing, and your glucose is elevated, but you're in a pretty stressful situation, that might be what it is. So we got to think, okay, let's take a step back and let's start to think about grounding and taking some adrenal support and prayer and meditation and things like that to support the nervous system, so we can get these back into range and reduce the inflammatory response that's happening. Okay, so another one, if we look at the immune system, for example, let's see. So the immune system, things that we can look at, which this is a fun one for me. So we've got globulin, the globulin and albumin ratio, HDL, and anion gap. So those are all things that can help us understand immune function and some inflammatory response. There are other inflammatory markers as well. My favorite thing about this, though, is the HDL. So we don't usually think about HDL being a part of the immune system. We see it as a lipid. We see it in our lipid panel. And so when we look at a lipid panel, what we typically see in a comprehensive metabolic panel is going to be your LDL, HDL, triglycerides. Maybe there's going to be VLDL in there. There might be, your LDL, HDL ratio. So, but what we're not seeing, or what we're not told, or I was never told until I started, running these panels and, digging in and learning more and more about it, is that HDL is a big part of the immune system. And so HDL, if it's too low, if it's too low, it's not pulling out the oxidized LDL like it's supposed to, but it's also a problem as far as the immune system's concerned. What we're told is the higher the HDL, the better. And so what is problematic with that is really, if you have HDL that's starting to push 80, 90, over 100, I'm starting to think, is there an immune system, is there an autoimmune situation going on? What's happening, what's going on with the immune system that HDL is being pushed so high, because it plays such an important role in immune function. So think about that. It's not, I've had multiple clients come and tell me that my HDL is fine and that it's really high and it's great, and we look at it and it's excessively high. So we don't want HDL to be excessively high. So huge red flag, right, as far as the immune system is concerned. So let's move on then, again, just kind of, expand that into a full lipid panel. We talk about this a lot, and so you can do, if you want to really, really dig into, excuse me, a lipid panel. I did a show on it probably a couple of years ago. It's probably time to do another one, and understanding cholesterol and your lipids and what they mean. So a quick overview is, when we're looking at a comprehensive metabolic panel, the lipid panel is quite minimal. It gives us some information. It doesn't give us a lot of information. And so when we are told that we are to be prescribed drugs based on this simple lipid panel, such as statins, we're say LDL, we're told we need to be on a statin because our LDL is too high. We don't know enough about it to really know if that's if we need to be on a statin or not. Statins are a last ditch, right? They are last ditch because they can create such massive problems. Okay, back up a little bit real quick. The role of HDL is to bring cholesterol to the tissues. We have to have cholesterol for brain function, for muscle function, for hormone production, for cellular integrity. It is key to the way that we function. It's normal, it's natural. The liver produces cholesterol, and we get very little serum cholesterol changes by food, very little. I would say, though, that genetics can play a role in that, right? So genetics really can play a role in how our bodies utilize saturated fats, cholesterol, and so that's an important piece to understand if it's something that you can do is looking at your genetics so you can truly understand your body and how it operates, because I'm one of those people where I don't utilize and break down cholesterol like most other people. So it can lead to a lot of things, but the fact that I know about it, I know what to do about it. And that's really the key. Genetics is huge, or epigenetics, these variants are huge in helping us understand the best ways for us to manage and mitigate disease later on. It's fascinating stuff. So genetics plays such a key role in the understanding, and it's a piece of the puzzle. It's not diagnostic, right? Genetics is not your epigenome, to be specific. Your epigenome is your potential. And so when you know your potential, you know how to either optimize it or mitigate problems. So it's cool stuff. But the role of LDL then is to, I'm sorry, I got it backwards. LDL brings cholesterol to the tissue. Don't know what I was thinking. LDL, which we're told is the bad cholesterol, right? We're told LDL is bad. It's not bad. It's necessary. LDL brings cholesterol to the tissue. They call HDL a good cholesterol because HDL then takes the used, oxidized LDL cholesterol. LDL is just a protein. It's a carrier protein, so it's carrying cholesterol around and doing what it's supposed to do. So HDL is a protein that carries cholesterol away from the tissues, and either to be excreted or to be reused for whatever purposes, right? So that's why they say HDL is good and LDL is bad, but it's not bad because we have to have cholesterol coming to the tissues. So what is most important about cholesterol or about these proteins is what we have to dig deeper into what they mean. So we have particle sizes of LDL, particle sizes of HDL. When we are healthy and we have normal inflammatory responses and everything is in balance, then we don't have to worry about cholesterol because it's functioning properly. When we're inflamed, that's when it creates what we call oxidized cholesterol, oxidized LDL, oxidized HDL. So these particles can become oxidized, and they become small and dense. So I always see them in my head. They call them, big, fluffy, buoyant particles, and I just sort of see them, bouncing around doing what they're supposed to do. When we're inflamed, when we're stressed, when we're eating unhealthy food, these particles become small and dense and oxidized. So that's when this inflammatory situation, the systemic inflammation is what changes the cholesterol and creates the problem. And that's when there's a problem with cholesterol. So what we need to do, we need to look at LDL, look at the LDL particle sizes, not just LDL, and look at inflammatory markers like CRP, homocysteine. Those two inflammatory markers, there are some other ones as well. That will help us understand inflammation. So if we're inflamed and we have elevated oxidized LDL, we have elevated small dense LDL, then we need to say, we need to change diet, we need to change lifestyle, we need to look at our genetics. Do we need to be on a statin? I would tell you that Dr. Steven Sinatra would say you don't need to be on statin unless you're a man who has already had a cardiovascular event, right? Statins, they impair brain function, muscle function, hormone production. We've already covered that. There are also certain genetics, mine included, that don't allow, or I would say variants. It's not genetics, it's epigenetic variants that people don't do well on statins, right? So we see that there are people who, they're like, I don't have any issues with my statins. I don't have any, brain fog or muscle pain or any of this stuff. And some people like my dad, who does have these variants, he's like, I don't know what's going on. I'm in pain all the time. It hurts, and he gets off his statin and the pain goes away. So we can't treat everybody the same, right? We're not all the same. We need to understand these pieces of ourselves If somebody's not going to test us, then we need to be educated and say, okay, these are the things that I think are going to be helpful for me, so I can understand what I need to do, or have somebody help me understand what I need to do to address the situation, address the elevated LDL, oxidized LDL, things like that. So these are all, for the most part, these are lifestyle changes that we can make. If it's genetic, there is a situation where there's, familial hypercholesterolemia, right? But we still, even again, if you're not inflamed, if you look at all of the pieces of the puzzle, but you still have LDL that's elevated, but it's not oxidized, or it's not small and dense, is it problematic? I'm going to say no. Again, going back to Stephen Sinatra, read his book. I mean, his book is amazing. So it literally states that the lower your cholesterol as you age, or the lower your LDL as you age, the higher your risk of stroke. So, I have a friend of mine who came to me. He ended up, he had a 95% blockage in his LAD, which is what they call the widowmaker, right? I mean, thank God it was caught, but then they told him you need to have your LDL below 50. And I'm like, LDL below 50, you just can make him stroke out, right? So being informed, and don't listen to me. I mean, I'm going to give you the information, but there's a ton of research out there. Go to Stephen Sinatra, read his books. I mean, it's fascinating stuff. But we've got to be so careful with this. Below 50 is insane in my mind, right? I'm not a doctor, but I do the research, and I am trained by functional medicine doctors who know the research. So, statins, the protection they give us is, what I think is like 1% change or something, 2%. It's something ridiculous. I should probably have those stats. But anyway, super important to really understand what this means and what you're in for when you see markers and you're prescribed drugs for them, okay? Really, really be knowledgeable as much as you can if you're being prescribed a drug. Seek the information, find out if it's something that you need, and don't assume that you need it forever, right? You want to, if it's something that you need, drugs have a place, without a doubt. But hopefully it's temporary. You take it, you make the lifestyle changes that need to be made, and you come off of it, right? I mean, we have to mitigate risk. Sometimes it's with drugs, but what we deal with as a society, these diseases and conditions and symptoms and problems, these are all lifestyle issues, right? We can't blame our family for this stuff. We might have the potential. That's what epigenetics is, why epigenetics is so beautiful. We might have the potential for certain diseases, autoimmune, cardiovascular, diabetes. Doesn't mean they have to express, right? It's up to us. It's up to me. So, which is amazing. I mean, it's the coolest thing in the world that really is truly up to me in large part. Okay. So we can look at other factors. So things to consider as far as detoxification, liver health, gut health. Those are things that we can look at. So GGT is an interesting one. GGT can help us understand some gallbladder health, but a big thing with GGT is it helps us understand glutathione. Glutathione being our master antioxidant. I was not told this until fairly recently. I mean, I always look at glutathione, but I'm looking at other things, and I wasn't looking at GGT. So it's so fun to have these little tips and tricks that we can start to take away from these. I'm learning every day. I mean, it's the best part about it, is I'm getting so much information, and what I get, then I can share here, or share with my clients. But understanding glutathione, and understanding oxidized glutathione. So glutathione being the master antioxidant, it helps to it helps with other antioxidants. It's so important in detoxification and cellular health, cellular detoxification. We have to have it, and we can also have genetic variants that can impact our glutathione. So sometimes it's not, we don't need to just go take glutathione, which isn't often absorbed well in the GI. There are specific forms of glutathione that are important to take. But we might need to do precursors like N-acetylcysteine, which is a precursor to glutathione, which might be a little easier on the body when we have low glutathione and our detoxification is not functioning properly. So detoxification can also not function properly due to epigenetic SNPs. So I have a doctor I work with periodically who will say, and I love the way he says it because he loves the genetics too, but he'll say, you know, there are no mistakes. And so it's so true. We, again, going back to potential, we have this potential. It's the way we're made. It's the way we're created. It's not a mistake. But we have, you know, it's who we are. And so when we have this information, it's this beautiful thing about where we are today is we can see this stuff. It's on paper. You know, you do a cheek swab and you can see your epigenetic potential, right? It's fascinating stuff. You can see if you don't detoxify properly. You can see, and you can see why, right? I mean, it's not easy. It's a whole, you know, course in and of itself, but we can see these things and understand why. We can see that, you know, maybe saturated fat doesn't work well for us, or that, you know, our methylation could be off, or why our homocysteine might not, you know, might be elevated, or, you know, if we have histamine intolerance, you know, the list goes on and on. So being able to see these things, and again, you know, you base it off symptoms, but it really helps to give us guidance on what we need to do to help to optimize our bodies. So a couple other ones, AST, ALT, those are liver enzymes, and as well as alkaline phosphatase. So those are things that functionally, when I'm looking at them, I think what are the lab ranges? I think the lab ranges are over 40, whereas functional ranges are over 26. So it doesn't, you know, if somebody comes to me and I see their AST and ALT over 26, I'm not freaking out. I'm not freaking out if it's over 40 either, but I am saying, okay, there's you know, these liver enzymes are produced by the liver when there's hepatic cell death, right? So it's these hepatocytes that are producing these enzymes when they're dying. So we don't want the liver to die, right? We don't want these cells to die. We need them. So we want to keep these below functional range, so we know that our liver is functioning well. At least that part of it. There are a lot of things we can look at. Lots of markers for looking at liver health. But anyway, we want to, you know, think about, again, what's the food that we're eating? What are the fats that we're eating? Are we eating processed foods? Are we eating the unhealthy oils, unhealthy fats? Those are the things that are going to impact liver function. Obviously, alcohol. What we're seeing today, though, is, and this also, we can see this in genes, as variants, but we're seeing people in children who are presenting with non-alcoholic fatty liver syndrome when they're not drinkers. Why is that? So yes, there are epigenetic variants that can push us that way, but it doesn't mean it's supposed to present. So what's happening? It's sugar, it's processed foods, it's all the bread and all the pasta and the unhealthy fats. These are the things that are going to be toxic for the liver, and the liver is going to, those hepatocytes are going to start to die off and put out these enzymes. And so we're seeing people with really struggling livers. They can't figure out why. Well, I'm not a drinker. Well, you might not be a drinker, but you're not eating well. And children with this syndrome, I mean, this is just really, really sad. So, you know, the food that our schools are feeding our kids. I don't have kids. I have enough friends with kids who are super frustrated with the foods that are being fed to children in schools. Again, it's trash for the most part. Unhealthy fats, preservatives, and then we don't let our kids go outside and run. We expect them to sit still in class. Kids are kids, right? Kids don't sit still. So feeding them nutrient-dense foods that are healthful is so important to everything that they're doing. They're growing bodies and growing brains. And in order to optimize them for their future, we have to feed them well. We can't give in to, you know, the quick fix and the fast foods and the, you know, I don't have time kind of stuff. I mean, I get that time is hard, but we have to feed our kids good, real food. Or we're just setting them up for failure, and it's just not fair. So, you know, things like canola oil, we're told are healthy, not healthy. Things like vegetable oil, we think are healthy because it has the word vegetable in it, not healthy, super inflammatory. So things we want to focus on: olive oil, coconut oil, avocado oil. Those are the things that are going to be ideal for good, healthy fat and supportive for the body. Let's see. I could just go on and on about these things, so I want to hit some good ones here. We had talked a little bit about the sodium-potassium balance and how that plays a role in adrenal health and understanding adrenal health, but it's also the nervous system, which is, you know, connected, right? It's always connected. And so when we are constantly stressed, our nervous system is dysregulated because we're constantly stressed, and we're constantly stressed and vice versa, right? It's kind of that vicious cycle. It plays off of each other. And so we can see this when we're looking at the sodium-potassium balance, because it can, here's some good notes on this, impacts nerve impulse transmission and cognitive function. And so we want to make sure that this sodium-potassium balance is the ratio is balanced, so we are supporting adrenal function, or it gives us insight as to what we need to do to support it, right? So let's see, moving on to, I want to talk about homocysteine. This is a good one. So homocysteine is a marker that in my experience, what I see is homocysteine is tested only by the your cardiologist when you're older, and it's seen as a cardiovascular inflammatory marker. This is a marker that I don't often see on a comprehensive metabolic panel that should be on every comprehensive metabolic panel. So it's not only a cardiovascular marker, so it's an inflammatory marker. So it's a cardiovascular inflammatory marker. It's also a cognitive inflammatory marker. And what we'll see on general lab ranges, that I think it depends on the lab, it might be over 13. I think I've seen it over 15, maybe over 18, that it's problematic. When if you go to Dr. Del Bredesen and look at his research, especially when it comes to cognitive function, Alzheimer's disease, reversing Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease is considered type 3 diabetes. Alzheimer's disease is a lifestyle disease. We can have genetic potential for it. I do. But when we know our genetics, we know how to mitigate it, right? So when it comes to his research, anything over 11 is a 100% chance of cognitive decline. So we have to keep that in mind. So I'm seeing, and I will look at this on every single client. They might be young, they might be old, and I've had clients come to me and tell me, my doctor told me I'm too young to have my homocysteine tested, and I test it, and it comes back at 11 or 12 or 13, right? Whatever. And so it's frustrating because it's, in most cases, it's a simple marker to reverse, to bring down. It's nutrients, it's B12, it's folate, it's magnesium, it's, it's B9, 6, 9, 12, yes. Anyway, so it's these specific B vitamins and some other nutrients that are important for methylation, important for detoxification. All of the homocysteine is involved in all of this, right? And so if you have certain variants that inhibit B12 or inhibit folate, then the pathway might push your homocysteine up. And so instead of it, being, continuing on down the pathway and going down the way that it's supposed to, it might just stay elevated. So we need to know that, and we need to see that so we're not, pushing inflammation and, pushing cardiovascular disease and cognitive disease. And so when we see that, we bring in these nutrients. I see it constantly. We bring in these specific nutrients and it comes down. It's mostly nutrient deficiency. We are nutrient deficient because of our diet, because of our lifestyle, because of our gut health, because of our epigenetic variants, but it can all be mitigated. So another thing that can push homocysteine is oxidative stress. So if we are full of toxins, if we are in an environment, whether it's a lot of stress can push oxidative stress, the food that we're eating can push oxidative stress, the toxins in the environment, heavy metals, mycotoxins, all of these things can push oxidative stress and put more stress on the body, and so that can push homocysteine up. So if that's the case, if we're taking the nutrients and we're not bringing down the homocysteine, then maybe we need to either bring things in that are going to help the body to manage the oxidative stress, right? So polyphenols, think fruits and vegetables, right? The polyphenols that help to bring in the antioxidants, think glutathione, think NAC, vitamin C, vitamin E. These are things, CoQ10, that can come in and help to the body to manage oxidative stress. So those things are really important. This is why fruits and vegetables are important. We have to have fruits and vegetables in order to mitigate oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is a normal part of biochemistry. It happens in cells, it happens in the mitochondria all the time, but we have to have that balance of oxidative stress, but then how do we squash that oxidative stress, right? So, it's that chronic elevation that can be problematic. So if your homocysteine is elevated, you're taking the nutrients that are supposed to bring it down that help methylation, and it's not working, then you might want to do an oxidative stress panel, which is so fun. I mean, it's really cool. I love them. You don't have to do them. It gives us a ton of information, but you might just say, well, maybe I just need to bring in more fruits and vegetables. I need to supplement with, high dose polyphenols, curcumin, resveratrol, things like that, to quercetin, to help then to squash that oxidative stress. So it's a really important marker, but typically pretty easy to manage. But it's also one that I would say you got to know. Oh, I don't think I gave you the range where I want it sitting. So the functional, so over 11 is 100% chance of cognitive decline, according to Dale Bredesen. Look him up; he's amazing. And then we want you sitting right around 7. Low homocysteine is also not good, right? So if it's around 6, you're starting to push low. So we really want you sitting right around 7. Okay. C-reactive protein is one that I do see maybe more regularly, but it's also considered a cardiovascular marker. You might see HSCRP, which is high sensitivity C-reactive protein. So that one is a global marker of inflammation, and we don't want to see that, and we don't want to, the range is 1 to 3. That's the functional range. I do think it goes, that might be also the lab range. I'm trying to remember. Do I have it written here? I don't know. Yeah, okay, there we go. So I think the general lab range is 1 to 3, and I'll see that even in functional range is the 1 to 3. But really, we want it less than 1. That's ideal. We want it as close to 0 as possible. So I've seen clients that have their CRP is 8, 16, 18, 32. Some can get up in the 80s. They can get really, really high. This is a huge, huge problem. It's a really, really important marker, and one that you need to know and you need to see, and needs to be done every year. A good big panel like this really should be done every year. We do a lot of testing. We'll do GI testing and hormone testing and all of these things, but this is one that can be done and oftentimes is covered by insurance, if not most of the time, and should be done every year. So you can keep track of it, because we want to know if your homocysteine was elevated, and we start to do things to bring it down, is it working, right? Or is it oxidative stress? So maybe, there are times when we want to look every 3 months. Okay, are we making the progress that we want to make? Because these things are really, really important to manage. And when we get them to that place, then we're like, okay, now we're at that place where we can check them every year, right? But sometimes you want to check them more because you need to make sure that we're doing the right things to move them in the right direction. Okay, I think let's see. I was thinking about doing omegas, and I think I'll do them anyway because I think that they are important enough. They are rarely on a comprehensive metabolic panel, but I think it's important enough to, sorry, I'm looking at my notes, important enough to talk about, because I tend to add it to my comprehensive metabolic panel, or I'll add it to my big lipid panel, because it also can help us understand the inflammatory response in the body. So if we have our omega-3, omega-6 ratio, back up. Omega-3 is a precursor to the anti-inflammatory cascade that happens to the body, in the body, whereas omega-6 is the precursor to the pro-inflammatory cascade that happens in the body. Both are important, okay? We go back to that balance. We have to have that balance, and we have to have both. So if you cut your finger, you have the pro-inflammatory cascade that comes in, you have the inflammation, you have the redness, you have the discomfort, but you have the healing process that's happening. But then you have to have the anti-inflammatory cascade to come in and squash that fire, so it doesn't stay red and inflamed and angry for an extended period of time. What we can have in the body, though, is I kind of see it as a little low-lying grass fire, but it's this low-lying inflammatory response that's happening that we don't really know is there. Is it causing symptoms? Maybe not yet. But we have this inflammatory response that often happens because our omega-6s are too high because of our diet and our lifestyle. So if we're eating meat that's conventionally raised meat, it's naturally higher in omega-6, which is not okay. This is an inflamed animal. When we eat inflamed animals, we're eating inflammation. We're eating omega-6. So that omega-6 is creating more omega-6 in us, creating more inflammation. If you're eating an animal that's natural, that's grass-fed, 100% grass-fed, pasture-raised, then they have a normal balance of omega-3 and omega-6, which means we're going to have a normal balance of omega-3, omega-6. If we're eating oils and fats that are pro-inflammatory oils and fats, your vegetable oils, your cottonseed oil, your canola oil, things like that, it's going to raise your omega-6. Now, there is omega-6 and omega-3 in oils. Some are just higher than others. So like grapeseed oil tends to be higher in omega-6. We tend to stay away from seed oils, even grapeseed oil. I don't think that they are really what we need. If we need to cook with something, I'm cooking with avocado oil. I'm not cooking with olive oil. You want to eat as much olive oil as you want. It's great. It's so important. Huge polyphenols in olive oil, but you want to just drizzle it on your food, but not cook with it because it doesn't stand the heat tolerance. So what happens? It potentially oxidizes it, creates an inflammatory product, and we're eating inflamed, potentially inflammatory olive oil. So that's not the goal, right? The goal is to create an anti-inflammatory response. So olive oil is great for that. So think about those in your fish, right? In your fish oil. Those are your omega-3s. Knowing, though, that there are omega-6s that are important. They are important for the body, but it's eating the right things and having the right balance, which is important. So we can look at our omega-3s, we can look at our omega-6s, and we can look at the ratios that can help us to understand if we are struggling with symptoms. It can be a piece of the puzzle. Well, I'm not eating enough fish, or I'm not taking a fish oil supplement, or I'm eating too much omega-6s, which is creating a response in the body. So again, we take all of these and put them into, I see it, I always call it a puzzle, because that's really what it is. You're putting all the pieces together so you can get as much of the picture together as you can, so you can know where to start and how to progress. And then listen to the body, right? So we're listening to the body, what the body's telling us, and how it's reacting to whether it's the food or the supplement protocol or whatever it is, and we're continuing to run labs, and we're listening to symptoms. So that's also listening to the body, but our symptoms starting to subside, right? Are we starting to feel better? Is the brain fog going away? Is the fatigue less? Is the joint pain less? Things like that. So all are play a huge role in how we feel today, and how we feel, for the rest of our lives, and then how we can work with our families so they can be optimal as well. So other things that I feel like I need to start to wrap this up, but we can look at other minerals. So minerals can help us understand electrolytes. Electrolytes are necessary for kidney function, for hydration. I think that most people probably need to increase mineral intake, need to increase electrolytes to keep hydrated. Most of us are dehydrated. And are we actually absorbing the water that we drink in? If we are drinking a lot of water but still feel dehydrated, why? Right? So we need to understand why. And again, goes back to, this is our body that's talking to us and trying to help us know that there's something that needs to be done, right? Always listen. It's always talking to us. It's really fascinating. I think that we are out of time. So a couple of things this is a good one too. So total protein, we'll look at protein. The functional range is 6.9 to 7.4, which is much more narrow than the typical lab range is. And so yes, it can suggest, malabsorption of protein, but also it can suggest liver stress. It can suggest level inflammation, right? So it's not just about protein. It's about the liver. It's about the inflammatory response. What else can we do real quickly? So another one, we did talk briefly about GGT, but it also can look at liver stress. It can help us understand oxidative stress, and it can, again, going back to help us understand glutathione levels. So we didn't talk about, let's see, probably this would be a good one to hit on also, is we are told, so we started off the show talking about thyroid function and thyroid health. And what we typically see is, we might see the most run marker is going to be TSH, right? So it's thyroid stimulating hormone, which is not actually the thyroid, right? It's the pituitary. So thyroid stimulating hormone comes from the pituitary to stimulate the thyroid. So if TSH is off, it might be causing thyroid dysfunction, but it really could be pituitary dysfunction. So these are the things that we need to know and understand. And certain lab ranges, they may have over 4 as a problem, they may have over 5 as a problem, they may have over 6 as a problem, when I actually started digging into functional lab ranges and getting trained on functional lab ranges, it was 3. So anything over 3, some people might have symptoms. It's going down, right? It's going down. It could be 2, right? It could be 1.8, right? It could be even lower. So and beyond that, I think everybody is different. I had a client recently tell me that, I think it was 0.3. She's like, anything over 0.3, I don't remember if that's exactly what it was, but she said she doesn't feel right. So being in tune is such a key player in understanding your body and your health. We have these generalizations, but it doesn't mean that's you. We have generalizations around, macronutrients. There's a generalization around how much protein we should have, but it doesn't mean it's you. We have epigenetic variants that can give us guidance as to how much protein we might need, how much fat we might need, how much carbohydrate we might need. That's the amazing thing about it. It's really, really fascinating stuff. But I do hope, though, that we went through these and you got some good information from this, knowing that, I mean, there's a lot more here, there's a lot more that we could cover, but it's about, you don't have to know all of these, but it's about questioning. It's about knowing that there's more to the story than is just what's sitting on that piece of paper. And I think that that's important to kind of goes back to what I say is always ask why. So look at those. You can look these functional ranges up if it's something that you're interested in, or you can find somebody who can help you understand them and decipher what it all means, because there are lots of really cool little clues in labs, even in stool testing and all neurological testing and all of these things that we have access to. There are these really amazing clues that can help us to do the things that to best help us to be as optimized as we can, and that's really what it's all about. So especially in this world where it so often just feels like there's so much confusion around health and around wellness and what is truly beneficial for us, what is truly going to help us to feel best. It's really confusing. That's why I started doing this, because I was so confused on what was right and what was wrong. And what's right for some is not right for everyone. But what I know is not right is the fact that we are told that the foods that we're eating, the foods that we're buying off the shelves are healthy when they are damaging, right? I'm just, it makes me really frustrated that there's so much confusion and terrible information. I was going to use the word disinformation. I hate that. It really annoys me. It really is about just flat out lies when it comes to our food and our health, and a lot of times our healthcare system. We're in a pretty nasty place as far as I'm concerned. But as I said, we have these people we have those of us who are starting to come forward and say, look, we need to stand up for ourselves. We need to be educated on what is best for me, and not just listen to everybody out there. This goes back to listening to bad diets, right? Bad diets are just that. There may be some benefit for some people, but it's not for everyone. Sorry, got a message coming in. So anyway, I will stop there. I hope you got something fun out of this. I know maybe it's a little bit nerdy, but I think it is really important for us to know what our body is trying to tell us, because that's what this is. The numbers on the paper are our body talking to us. And it really is fun, and it helps us to know when we have symptoms, why do we have the symptoms, and how we can manage them. So, of course, and as always, you can find us here 10 a.m. Mountain Time, streaming live on kuhsdenver.com, and you'll find us on all of the socials. You'll find us on the podcast, Taste Life Nutrition podcast, and you can go to the website, Taste Life Nutrition. I have a free assessment you can fill out that helps me to understand at a sort of superficial level, what is going on with your body and how we might be able to talk about it and see what we can do to help, if I can help, or if I can find someone who might be able to help you. My goal is to be a resource and to give guidance and just give as much information as I can and have some fun with it, right? Have some fun with what your body's trying to tell you, because it's really cool stuff. It really is. So reach out, let me know if there's anything you need. I'll be back here 10 a.m. Mountain Time, again, streaming live on kuhsdenver.com next Thursday, and we'll see you then. Bye.